Some love stories begin with a kiss. This one began with a bullet. Cody Hank had spent 5 years as a ghost, haunting the desert ranch that was all he had left of family, of hope, of anything worth protecting. He'd forgotten what it meant to trust another human being. Then she appeared through the dust devils and the gunfire, a woman who'd throw herself in front of death for a stranger, and everything he thought he knew about survival shattered in the space of a heartbeat. The desert heat pressed down like a brand as Cody stood at his fence line, watching 3 black SUVs crawl across the horizon. Dust rose behind them like smoke signals announcing war. His hand drifted to the Colt at his hip, worn smooth by 3 generations of Hank men who'd refused to surrender this land. If today was the day the Sons of Perdition finally took what they wanted, they'd have to pry it from his cold, dead hands. The SUVs stopped 50 yards out. Doors opened in military precision. 6 enforcers emerged, spreading out with the practiced efficiency of men who killed for a living. The lieutenant leading them, dead-eyed and hollow-voiced, was familiar from wanted posters gathering dust in the sheriff's office. But it was the 4th vehicle that caught Cody's attention. Sleek, expensive, wrong. A woman stepped out, business casual, stretched over a body that moved with unmistakable tactical awareness. Her eyes swept the killing field with professional calculation. Cover positions, exit routes, the weapon at his hip. When her gaze met his, something electric sparked between them. Recognition. Warning. Something deeper he couldn't name. "Last chance, Cowboy," the lieutenant called, voice flat as the desert floor. "Sign the papers. Walk away breathing." Cody's laugh tasted like desert dust and defiance. "Then make it count." The shot came without ceremony, meant to execute, not negotiate. Cody moved on pure instinct, drawing and firing before thought could slow him down. But 6 against 1 were bad odds, even for a man with nothing left to lose. Then she moved. Not away from the violence, but into it. Cody saw her in peripheral vision, a blur of motion crossing the killing ground at a dead sprint. She saw what he couldn't. The sniper on the SUV roof, the red dot painting his chest, the half-second between life and death. Her body slammed into his as the rifle cracked. They hit the ground hard, tangled together, her weight driving the air from his lungs. Heat bloomed across her shoulder, wet, spreading, wrong, blood. Her blood. Soaking through white fabric, pooling on his hands, painting the thirsty desert floor. "Who the hell are you?" Cody gasped, dragging them both behind his truck as bullets tore through the air above. She looked at him through eyes bright with pain and something fiercer, defiance maybe, or dark humor in the face of death. "Someone who just saved your life. Cowboy." Her breath came in short gasps. "You're welcome." The enforcers pulled back. Her injury wasn't part of their plan. They retreated like shadows, leaving only dust and blood and questions. Cody gathered the woman into his arms, surprised by how light she felt, how heavy her secrets seemed. She was unconscious before they reached the cabin, her blood trailing behind them as the sun bled red across the horizon. 3 hours earlier, Cody Hank had been exactly what he'd spent 5 years becoming. Invisible, untouchable, alone. The kind of alone that felt like armor after his unit had been ambushed in Kandahar, after watching brothers in arms bleed out while calling for mothers who couldn't hear them, after coming home to find his parents' ranch being circled by vultures, both the feathered kind and the human kind, wearing S.O.P. insignia. He'd learned the hard way that everyone you let close becomes a target, that love was just another word for liability. So he'd built a fortress out of silence and solitude, becoming a ghost on land that demanded ghosts to guard it. Now he carried a bleeding stranger across his threshold, and every instinct that had kept him alive screamed that his carefully constructed isolation had just been blown to hell. She'd saved him. That was the kind of debt you couldn't walk away from, even if every fiber of his being wanted to. Even if the smart move was to patch her up and send her away before she became another person he'd have to bury. But as he laid her on his table, watching blood soak through improvised bandages, Cody realized something that terrified him more than any bullet. For the first time in 5 years, he didn't want to be alone anymore. The cabin smelled like gun oil and old coffee, exactly the way Cody preferred it. Functional, Spartan. No photographs on the walls, no memories cluttering the shelves, just ammunition, MREs, and the kind of medical supplies that raised questions if you thought too hard about why a rancher needed military-grade trauma kits. He laid the woman across his kitchen table, the same scarred wood where he cleaned his rifles and ate dinners alone. Blood soaked through her blouse, spreading like a dark flower across white fabric. Her face had gone pale, lips pressed tight against pain, but her eyes tracked his every movement with unsettling awareness. "I need to get that bullet out," Cody said, already reaching for his medical kit. "I've got morphine." "No." Her voice was steady despite the tremor running through her body. "Need to stay alert." He paused, antiseptic bottle in hand. "You've been shot. In the shoulder. This is going to hurt like hell." "I've had worse days." The corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like a challenge. Cody studied her. Really looked. Mid-20s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail now matted with dust and blood. Olive skin, high cheekbones, eyes that held too many secrets for someone so young. And that tactical awareness, the way she'd already clocked the 3 exits, the weapons cache behind the false cabinet, the defensive positioning of his furniture. "You military?" he asked, cutting away her blouse with practiced efficiency. The wound beneath was clean through and through, which was lucky. The bullet had missed bone and major arteries. "I've had some training," she hissed as he pressed gauze against the entry wound. "You?" "Some." He didn't elaborate. The scars on his hands told their own story if she was smart enough to read them. "Your bedside manner needs work," she gasped as he probed the wound, checking for fragments. "You're bleeding on my floor. I'm doing my best." He threaded a needle with steady hands. "This is going to hurt." "Everything hurts. Stop narrating and start stitching, Cowboy." Despite himself, Cody felt his mouth twitch. Most people screamed when you dug bullets out of them. This woman was making jokes. "Got a name, or should I just call you pain in my ass?" "Jade." She watched him work with disconcerting focus. "Jade Martinez." "And you are?" "Cody Hank. This is my land you almost died on." He made the first stitch. Her entire body went rigid, but she didn't make a sound. Just bit down on her lip hard enough to draw blood. "What were you doing here, Jade Martinez?" "Same thing as you." Her breathing came faster now, shallow, fighting the sons of perdition. "Is that right?" He kept his voice neutral, conversational, even as his hands moved with surgical precision. "Because you rolled up in a fancy car, looking like you were there to broker a deal, not stop one." "I'm an investigator. City sent me." The lie came smooth, rehearsed. "Been tracking the S.O.P. for 3 years. Gathering evidence. Today was supposed to be recon." "City investigator who moves like special ops and takes bullets like it's Tuesday?" Cody tied off another stitch. "Which city are we talking about? Langley?" She almost smiled at that. "Almost. Just a girl who learned to survive dangerous men. You'd be surprised what you pick up." He moved to the exit wound, cleaning, stitching. His hands brushed her bare shoulder, and he felt the heat of her skin, the fine tremor of suppressed pain running through her. She smelled like blood and expensive perfume, and something else cordite, maybe gunpowder. The scent of someone familiar with violence. "They killed someone I loved," she said quietly, and this time there was something raw in her voice. "Real. 3 years ago. That's when I started hunting them. That's why I'm here." Cody's hands stilled. He understood that kind of loss, that kind of rage that burned so long it became ice in your veins. He'd carried it since Kandahar, since watching his unit get torn apart, since coming home to find his parents' legacy under siege. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it. "Don't be sorry." Jade's eyes met his, fierce despite the pain. "Just tell me you're not planning to hand me back to them for whatever bounty Billy Kovalenko's offering." So she knew who ran the S.O.P. That was something. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have left you bleeding in the dirt." Comforting. She tried to shift, winced. "How much longer?" "Almost done." He tied off the final stitch, applied antibiotic ointment, began wrapping gauze around her shoulder. His hands were gentle despite their scarred roughness, and he couldn't help noticing how small she seemed under his touch. Fragile, except nothing about her was fragile. She'd thrown herself in front of a bullet without hesitation. "Why'd you do it?" The question came out before he could stop it. "Save me. You don't know me." Jade's eyes had started to glaze, shock and blood loss finally catching up. "Couldn't let you die. Not like that. Not," her words slurred. "Need you alive if I'm going to." She passed out mid-sentence, body going limp. Cody caught her before she could slide off the table, easing her down with careful hands. In unconsciousness, her face softened. Young, too young to be hunting monsters, too young to have that much death in her eyes. He stood there, one hand still on her wrist, checking her pulse steady, strong, and felt the walls he'd built around himself crack just slightly. She'd saved his life, created a debt he couldn't ignore. And worse, she'd made him curious. Who was she really? What was she hiding behind that cover story full of holes? While she slept, Cody searched her belongings. Small duffel bag, professionally packed, extra magazines for a Glock 19, encrypted phone, fake ID that looked real enough to fool anyone who wasn't military intelligence, cash in 3 different currencies, and absolutely nothing linking her to any city investigation unit. She was lying. He knew it. She knew he knew it. And somehow that made her even more dangerous. Cody pulled up a chair 6 feet from the table, his Colt resting on his thigh, and watched her breathe, watched her chest rise and fall, watched the way moonlight through the window painted silver across her face. She'd thrown herself in front of death for him. That kind of crazy didn't come without a price tag. She saved my life, he thought, studying the mysterious woman who'd crashed into his isolation like a bullet through glass. That didn't mean I had to trust her, but damn if part of me didn't want to. Morning light filtered through the cabin's single window, painting everything in shades of amber and dust. Larissa woke to find Cody Hank watching her from across the room, coffee mug in one hand, Colt resting on the table beside him like a sleeping dog that might wake at any moment. "If you were going to shoot me," she said, voice rough with sleep and pain, "you'd have done it while I was unconscious. Day's not over yet." He took a slow sip of coffee, dark eyes unreadable. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her shoulder, white-hot and breathtaking. A sound escaped her throat, half gasp, half curse, and suddenly he was there, one hand steadying her back, the other holding a glass of water to her lips. "Easy." His voice was gruff, but his hands were gentle. "You lost a lot of blood. Move too fast and you'll tear the stitches." Larissa drank, studying him over the rim of the glass. He moved with military efficiency, every gesture economical, purposeful, the way he'd positioned himself with clear sightlines to both doors, the way his hand never strayed far from his weapon, the way he watched her with the patient intensity of a predator assessing whether she was prey or fellow hunter. "Thank you," she said, handing back the glass, "for not killing me in my sleep. Give me time." But there was the faintest hint of humor in his voice. He retrieved a plate, scrambled eggs, toast, something that might have been bacon before it got acquainted with a skillet. "Eat. You need protein." She obeyed, surprised by how hungry she was. The food was basic but good, cooked by someone who understood calories as fuel, not pleasure. "Military?" she asked between bites. "Contracting work. Overseas." He settled back into his chair, maintaining that careful distance. "You?" "Investigative work, mostly stateside." The lie came easily, woven with enough truth to feel solid. "Though I've spent time in some interesting places. Learned from interesting people." "Interesting people who taught you to move like that?" He gestured vaguely at her. "To take a bullet like it's a paper cut?" "Survival instinct. You pick things up when dangerous men want you dead." She met his gaze. "Why are you out here alone? A man with your skills could find work anywhere. Easier to shoot snakes when you're not worried about collateral damage." "That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting." He stood, moved to the window, checked the perimeter with practiced paranoia. "Why do you care?" "Because you saved my life too," Larissa said quietly. "You could have left me to bleed, could have handed me over, but you didn't. So, I'm curious what happened to Cody Hank that made him choose isolation over everything else." He was silent for a long moment, back still turned. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. She recognized the kind of grief that had calcified into bone. "Same thing that happens to everyone who stays in hell too long. You stop believing in heaven." The words hit her harder than they should have. She'd spent her whole life in her father's particular brand of hell, learned young that heaven was a fairy tale for people who didn't know how darkness tasted. "My father was a bad man," she heard herself say, the truth spilling out before she could stop it. "Violent, controlling. I spent my whole life trying to be nothing like him." Cody turned then, really looked at her. She saw recognition in his eyes, not of her face, but of her pain. Kinship between damaged things. "Is he why you're hunting the SOP?" "Partly. That was true enough. She was hunting them, just not the way he thought." She tried to stand, needing to move, to escape the intensity of his gaze. The room tilted violently. Her legs buckled. Cody caught her before she hit the floor, arms solid around her waist, his chest against her uninjured side. They stayed frozen like that, her hands fisted in his shirt, his breath warm against her temple. She could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong, and smell leather and soap, and something uniquely him. "You're stronger than you look, Cowboy," she managed, breathless from pain and proximity, and something else entirely. "You're lighter than you look, Jade." His hands lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary, also more annoying. She laughed, couldn't help it, and the sound surprised them both. Genuine amusement breaking through layers of deception and pain. "I've been called worse." "Give me time," he said again, but this time he was almost smiling. He eased her back onto the makeshift bed he'd constructed from blankets. "You need to rest." "I need to move." She shifted carefully, testing her range of motion. "The SOP knows I was there. They'll be looking for me. For both of us." "Let them look. This land doesn't give up its secrets easily." He crossed back to his chair, putting distance between them again. "You said you have evidence that could bring them down?" "I do, but I need time to heal before I can move it. Use it." She met his eyes. "I need a few days, maybe a week." Cody studied her, weighing trust against survival instinct, gratitude against common sense. Finally, he nodded. "You can stay. Until you can walk without falling into my arms every 5 minutes. Worried you'll get tired of catching me? Worried I'll start to like it." The words came out rougher than he'd intended, and they both felt the charge in the air shift, sharpen. Night fell like a curtain, turning the cabin into a pool of lamplight surrounded by darkness. Larissa lay awake, watching Cody clean his weapons with the methodical care of ritual. He disassembled his Colt piece by piece, cleaning each component with an intimacy that spoke of countless repetitions. "You ever let anyone in?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Or have you always been a ghost?" His hand stilled on the barrel. "Once." The single word carried oceans of grief. Didn't end well. She wanted to ask more, but the pain in his voice stopped her. Instead, she watched him reassemble the weapon with quick, precise movements, watched the way shadows played across his face, highlighting the hard planes and old scars. He was handsome in a brutal sort of way, the kind of beauty that came from surviving things that should have killed you. "I'm sorry," she said. "Don't be. I survived. That's more than most." They fell silent then, each lost in their own darkness. Cody at his table, Larissa on her makeshift bed, the cabin holding them both in careful suspension. She could feel him aware of her the same way she was aware of him, a magnetic pull that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with recognition. Two damaged people circling each other in the desert, both carrying secrets that could destroy them. "I came here to betray him," Larissa thought, watching the lamplight catch in his dark hair as he worked. The plan was simple. Gain his trust, use his ranch as a base, coordinate with my father's enemies, and burn the SOP to the ground from the inside. Cody Hank was supposed to be a tool, a means to an end. So why did lying to him feel like the worst thing I'd ever done? A week in the desert changed a person. Larissa had seen hardened operatives break under the relentless heat, the isolation, the silence so deep it made you hear your own thoughts too clearly. But she was healing faster than she should have, moving with more ease than a woman who'd taken a bullet through the shoulder had any right to. Cody noticed. Of course he noticed. The man missed nothing. "If you're staying," he said on the 8th morning, watching her stretch without wincing, "you need to learn how this land works. It kills tourists." "I'm not a tourist." "Prove it." He tossed her a canteen, already moving toward the door. "Sun's up, time's wasting." The desert was a different world in daylight, beautiful and merciless in equal measure. Cody led her through arroyos and across hardpan, teaching her to read the land like a language, where to find water, how to track by disturbed stones and broken branches, which plants would save your life and which would end it. "This here," he crouched beside a cluster of prints in the sand. "Coyote. Passed through maybe 2 hours ago. See how the edges are still sharp? Wind hasn't had time to soften them." Larissa knelt beside him, studying the pattern. "Male or female?" He glanced at her, surprised. "Male. How'd you know?" "Deeper impression on the front pads. Heavier animal." She stood, brushing dust from her jeans. "You're not the only one who knows how to track. Thought you were a city investigator." "I believe in being prepared. Never know when you'll need to survive in hostile territory. She kept her voice light, casual, even as guilt twisted in her gut. Every truth she told him was wrapped in lies. Every skill she revealed brought her closer to exposure. By afternoon, the heat was murderous. Larissa felt sweat tracking down her spine, plastering her borrowed shirt to her skin. Cody, infuriatingly, looked barely affected, like the desert had claimed him long ago and now recognized him as its own. "City girl problems?" he asked, not quite hiding his amusement. "I'm fine." She wasn't fine. She was melting. But she'd be damned before she admitted it. "Sure you are." He handed her the canteen. "Drink. Dehydration will kill you faster than a bullet out here." She drank, grateful despite her pride. "You're enjoying this?" "Little bit." His grin was quick and devastating. "Payback for making me dig a bullet out of you. I saved your life. You got shot. There's a difference." By evening, they'd made their way to a makeshift range, tin cans lined up on a rock formation 200 yards out. Cody handed her his rifle without ceremony. "Show me what you've got." Larissa checked the weapon with practiced efficiency magazine, chamber, sight alignment. She settled into position, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The first can exploded. Then the second, third, fourth, all center mass. When she lowered the rifle, Cody was staring at her with something between suspicion and admiration. "Thought you were an investigator, not a sniper." "I told you, I've been shot at. You learn fast or you don't learn at all." She offered him the rifle. "Your turn, cowboy." He took it, but his eyes stayed on her. "Who taught you to shoot like that?" "Does it matter?" She turned away before he could see the lie in her eyes. "We both have skills. We both have secrets. Isn't that enough?" For a moment, she thought he'd push. Then he simply nodded and lined up his own shots, each one perfect. Each one proof that Cody Hank was more than just a rancher playing at isolation. "Fair enough," he said quietly. "Your secrets are your own." If only that were true. They moved on to urban tactics after that, Larissa's revenge for the desert survival lesson. She showed him how to use doorways as fatal funnels, how to clear rooms with minimal exposure, how to turn everyday objects into weapons or shields. "Where'd you learn this?" Cody asked, following her through a scenario she'd constructed using his cabin's layout. "Same place you learned to kill a man with a Cowboy in under 3 seconds. She demonstrated a defensive position. "We've all got our war stories." He moved to correct her stance, hands settling on her hips to adjust her angle. The contact was electric, his palms warm through denim, his chest close enough that she could feel his heat. They both froze, awareness crackling between them like static before a storm. "Like this," he said, voice rough. He shifted her position, professional despite the tension. "Better angle for return fire." "Right." She could barely breathe. "Better angle." They pulled apart too quickly, both retreating to opposite sides of the cabin like boxers to their corners. That evening, they sat on his porch watching the sun bleed across the horizon, all reds and golds and purples that seemed impossible outside of paintings. Cody produced a bottle of whiskey, offering it without comment. Larissa took it, grateful for the burn that had nothing to do with attraction. "Tell me about your family," she said. "The ones who built this place." Cody was quiet for a long moment, bottle dangling from his fingers. "My grandfather bought this land with money he earned breaking his back in copper mines, built the cabin with his own hands. My father expanded it, fought off 3 attempts by developers to buy him out." He took a drink. "S.O.P. wants this land because it's the last piece they don't control. My family bled for this dirt. I'll be damned if I let some Ukrainian gangster take it." Larissa flinched, couldn't help it. Ukrainian. Her father's blood. Her blood. "You okay?" Cody asked, catching the reaction. "Fine. She scrambled for cover. "Just thinking about all the families they've destroyed. All the blood on their hands." That was true enough. Her father had left a trail of bodies that stretched back to Kiev. She changed the subject before he could probe deeper. "Teach me to ride?" He blinked at the shift. "You don't know how to ride?" "I know how to survive cities. Teach me to survive this." She gestured at the vast emptiness surrounding them. All of it. Something softened in his face then. He stood, offered his hand. "Come on, daylight's burning." His horse was a paint gelding named Ghost, fitting for a man who'd become one himself. Cody moved around the animal with easy affection, checking tack, adjusting stirrups. When he lifted Larissa into the saddle, his hands spanned her waist completely, and she felt the strength in him leashed, controlled, dangerous. "Easy," he murmured, and she wasn't sure if he was talking to her or the horse. The lesson was patient chaos. Larissa, for all her tactical training, had never learned this particular skill. She gripped the saddle horn like it was the only thing keeping her from flying into orbit while Cody walked beside her, one hand on the reins, voice steady with instruction. "Relax. The horse can feel your tension." "I am relaxed." "You're rigid as a 2x4. But he was almost smiling. "Trust the animal. Trust yourself." After an hour, something clicked. Larissa felt herself move with Ghost instead of against him. Felt the rhythm of it settle into her bones. When Cody finally let go of the reins, she didn't panic, just leaned forward and let the horse move. "There you go," Cody called, genuine pride in his voice. "City girl's got some country in her after all." She laughed free and genuine and uncomplicated. The sound carried across the desert like a promise, and when she looked back at him, she saw something shift in his expression. Wonder, maybe, or recognition of something he'd thought was dead. "Race you," she challenged, not knowing where the impulse came from. "You're going to lose." "Probably. But I'm going to look good doing it." They raced across the desert as the sun set, horses kicking up dust that caught the dying light. Larissa felt the wind in her hair, heard her own laughter mixing with Cody's rare chuckle. And for just a moment, one perfect, stolen moment, she wasn't Larissa Kovalenko, daughter of the rattlesnake. She was just Jade, just a woman racing a man who made her feel alive. Cody watched her ride ahead of him, her laughter carrying back on the desert wind, and felt something crack open in his chest. I'd spent 5 years alone, he thought, watching her dark hair stream behind her like a banner. Built walls so high I thought nothing could scale them. Took this woman less than 2 weeks to make me remember what I'd been missing. That should have terrified me. Instead, I wanted more. Don't miss what happens next. Please subscribe. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're watching from. 3 weeks in the desert, and they'd fallen into a rhythm that felt dangerously like belonging. Cody would wake before dawn to check the perimeter, while Larissa made coffee strong enough to strip paint. They'd train together, eat together, sit in comfortable silence while the sun painted the sky in impossible colors. It was domestic in a way that terrified them both because domestic meant attachment, and attachment meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant pain. The storm announced itself with a smell, ozone and dust, and something electric that made the hair on Cody's arm stand up. He moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, securing shutters, checking seals, bringing in firewood. Larissa helped without being asked, anticipating his movements like they'd been doing this dance for years instead of weeks. "Big one coming," Cody said, scanning the darkening horizon. Clouds piled up like bruises, purple and black and angry. "How big?" "The kind that reminds you how small you are." He secured the last shutter. "Could last all night." The first gust hit like a fist. The cabin groaned, wood and nails protesting the wind's assault. Rain followed, not the gentle kind, but desert rain that fell like bullets, punishing everything it touched. Thunder cracked so close it rattled the windows, and lightning turned the world white for split seconds that burned afterimages into their vision. Cody noticed Larissa had gone rigid, pressed against the far wall with her arms wrapped around herself. Her breathing came too fast, shallow. Fear he'd never seen in her, not when she'd taken a bullet, not when he'd dug it out, not even when she'd learned to ride a 1,500-pound animal at full gallop. "Jade." He crossed to her slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. "Hey, you okay?" "I'm fine." But her voice shook, betraying the lie. "You're not fine. Talk to me." Another crack of thunder. She flinched hard. "I hate storms. Stupid, I know. I've been shot at, nearly died, but thunder." She laughed bitterly. "It takes me back." "Back where?" "My father." The words came quiet, raw. "When I was a kid, he'd lock me in the basement during his business meetings. Said I was safer there, where I couldn't see or hear anything. But I could hear the storms, hours in the dark with just the thunder in my imagination." She met his eyes. "Turns out imagination is worse than reality most of the time." Cody's jaw tightened. He'd known her father was bad, but this locking a child in darkness while monsters did monster things above her head. He sat beside her on the floor, close but not touching. "You're safe here, I promise." "How can you promise that? Emotion broke through her careful control. You don't even know me. Not really. I've told you pieces, fragments, but the whole truth. I know you took a bullet for me. His voice was steady, absolute. I know you laugh when you think I'm not listening. I know you're running from something, and I don't care what it is. I know who you are right now, in this moment. That's enough. It shouldn't be enough. You should care. If you knew who I really was. He cut her off with a look that made her breath catch. I know who you are right now. That's enough. The storm raged outside, but inside, everything went still. Larissa stared at him, this man who'd seen through her lies and chosen to trust her anyway, who'd let her into his fortress of isolation, who looked at her like she was something precious instead of damaged. The carefully constructed walls around her heart cracked. You gonna stare at me all night, Cody said, voice rough. Or do something about it. She kissed him, desperate, hungry, like they'd both been drowning and finally found air. His hands came up to cradle her face, gentle despite the intensity, and she tasted whiskey and something uniquely him, smoke and leather and desert dust. Jade, he pulled back, breathing hard. Are you sure? I haven't been sure of anything in years. She kissed him again, deeper this time. But I'm sure of this. They moved to the bed, his bed, where he'd slept alone for 5 years, building walls and calling it protection. Cody's hands were reverent as they traced her scars, the bullet wound he'd stitched, still pink and healing, and older marks she'd collected like bitter souvenirs. His own body told stories and scars, shrapnel in his shoulder, knife work across his ribs, burns on his forearms that spoke of close calls and survival. You're beautiful, he whispered against her skin. I'm a mess. Same thing. He kissed each scar like a benediction, like he was trying to heal wounds that went deeper than flesh. The storm shook the cabin, but inside they built their own weather, heat, and need, and something that felt like salvation. Larissa had been with men before, but this was different. This was Cody, seeing all of her, the lies, the darkness, the carefully hidden desperation, and choosing her anyway. When they came together, it felt like completion. Like two broken pieces finding their matching edges. After, they lay tangled in sheets damp with sweat, listening to rain hammer the roof. Cody's arm was solid around her waist, his breath warm against her neck. Larissa felt tears sliding down her face, not from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of what she'd done, what she was still doing. I'm not who you think I am, she whispered. His arms tightened. None of us are. We're all just trying to survive. She almost told him then. Almost confessed everything, her real name, her father, the land deal, the whole bloody truth. The words gathered in her throat, pressing against her teeth like prisoners demanding release. But she was a coward, so instead, she turned and kissed him again, pouring every apology she couldn't say into the contact. He kissed her back, believing it was passion when it was really goodbye rehearsed in the dark. They fell asleep, tangled together, the storm still raging, both believing this was real, believing they could have this, believing love might be enough to overcome the secrets that would inevitably destroy them. Hours later, Larissa woke to find moonlight filtering through gaps in the shutters. The storm had passed, leaving everything clean and quiet. Cody slept beside her, his face soft in a way it never was during daylight, younger, unguarded, trusting. She traced the line of his jaw with her eyes, memorizing him, loving him. God, when had that happened? When had Cody Hank, this ghost of a man with his walls and his wounded eyes, become the most important thing in her world? I'm sorry, she whispered into the darkness, so quiet he couldn't possibly hear. For what I'm about to do to you, I'm so sorry. Because the land deal was happening, her father was coming. And no matter how much she loved Cody, no matter how desperately she wanted to stay in this cabin and pretend the world outside didn't exist, reality was closing in. Soon he'd discover who she really was. Soon he'd realize that the woman he'd let inside his fortress was the daughter of his greatest enemy. Soon he'd look at her with hatred instead of love, and that would hurt worse than any bullet. She cried silently, her tears soaking into his shoulder while his arm stayed solid around her waist, holding her close, believing she was something she wasn't, believing in a future that could never exist. Outside, the desert sparkled under starlight, washed clean by the storm. Inside, 2 people lay tangled together in the dark, one sleeping peacefully, one breaking apart with guilt, both damaged, both desperate, both believing. For just one more night, that love might be enough. It wouldn't be. But for now, in the silence after the storm, Larissa let herself pretend. Dawn painted the cabin in shades of gold and honey, soft light that made everything feel like a dream. Larissa woke wrapped in Cody's arms, his body warm against her back, his breath steady against her neck. For a moment, one perfect, stolen moment, she let herself believe this could be real, that she could be Jade Martinez forever and leave Larissa Kovalenko buried in the past where she belonged. Then Cody stirred, his hand sliding down her hip, pulling her closer. "Morning," he murmured, voice rough with sleep. "Morning." She turned in his arms, found him watching her with an expression that made her heart stutter, tender, possessive, completely unguarded. He kissed her slowly, thoroughly, like they had all the time in the world. His hands mapped her body with new confidence, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into him. When he moved over her, she wrapped her legs around his waist and let herself drown in sensation, the slide of skin on skin, the way he whispered her name like a prayer, the building pressure that made thought impossible. "Look at me," Cody commanded, one hand tangling in her hair. "I want to see you." She opened her eyes, met his gaze, and felt something break open in her chest. This was intimacy beyond the physical. This was being seen, truly seen, and not turning away. When they moved together, it felt like completion, like coming home to a place she'd been searching for her entire life. After, they lay tangled together, breathing hard, the morning light making patterns on the walls. Cody traced lazy circles on her shoulder, careful of the still healing wound. "That was—" "Yeah," she laughed softly. "It was. We should probably get up." "Probably." Neither of them moved. Eventually, hunger drove them from bed. They navigated the morning with shy smiles and careful touches, new lovers learning each other's rhythms. Cody showed her how to cook over an open fire, his hands guiding hers as they built the perfect bed of coals. She burned the first attempt at scrambled eggs, and his laughter was so genuine it made her chest ache. "City girl can shoot a man at 200 yards but can't cook eggs," he teased, hip-checking her away from the fire to salvage breakfast. "I have other skills." She pulled out her laptop, encrypted and running through 3 proxy servers. "Let me show you something." She walked him through military-grade communications protocols, showing him how to hide data, how to send messages that would disappear seconds after being read, how to track movement patterns through cell tower pings. Cody watched with growing suspicion. "Where does City Investigator learn this?" he asked, studying the screen full of code. "I told you. I've been hunting dangerous men for 3 years." She kept her voice light, casual, even as panic fluttered in her throat. "You learn, or you die." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded, accepting the explanation because he wanted to, because trust felt better than suspicion. Fair enough. The week passed in a blur of training and touch, planning and passion. They'd sit up late mapping S.O.P. operations, marking territory on old survey maps, building a strategy that existed mostly in theory. Then Cody would look at her a certain way, and the maps would end up on the floor while they mapped each other instead. "There's a compound," Cody said one evening, pointing to a spot on the map. "Diamondback Ranch. That's where they coordinate everything: shipments, deals, enforcement. If we could get inside, get evidence." Larissa's blood went cold. Diamondback Ranch. Where the final land deal would be signed. Where her father would come to claim his victory. Where everything would end. "Let me go in," she said, keeping her voice steady. "They don't know my face. I can plant evidence, get what you need." "Not a chance." His response was immediate, absolute. "You just healed from 1 bullet. I'm not watching you take another. I can handle myself." "I know you can. Doesn't mean I'm letting you walk into a viper's nest alone." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "We'll find another way." "There is no other way." She pushed back, frustration bleeding through. "This is what I came here to do. Why did you let me stay if you weren't going to let me help?" "Because I'm an idiot who fell for a woman who's too brave for her own damn good." The words hung in the air between them, confession and accusation all at once. Cody looked stunned, like he hadn't meant to say it, like the truth had ambushed him same way she'd ambushed his isolation. Larissa felt her world tilt. "Say that again." "I fell for you." His voice was rough, vulnerable, terrified. "Happy? That's not something I do. Hasn't been for 5 years. But you make me want to try. You make me want He stopped, jaw working. Hell, you make me want everything. She kissed him, then desperate, drowning, pouring every truth she couldn't speak into the contact. He kissed her back, believing it was passion when it was really apology. Really goodbye. I won't go alone, she whispered against his mouth. I promise. It was the easiest lie she'd ever told. That night, she waited until he was deeply asleep, helped along by the sedative she'd slipped into his evening coffee. The guilt of it made her sick, but not sick enough to stop. She dressed quietly, gathered her gear, moved through the cabin like the ghost he'd once been. The note was simple. Trust me. I'll come back. I promise. Jay. She left it on the table beside his Colt, knowing he'd see it first thing. Knowing it wouldn't be enough. Knowing nothing would be enough when he discovered the truth. Outside, Ghost waited where she'd quietly saddled him an hour before. She mounted up, looked back at the cabin one last time. Lamplight glowed in the window, warm and inviting. Home. For 3 weeks, it had been home. She turned away and rode toward Diamondback Ranch as the moon rose cold and white over the desert. He loved me, Larissa thought, the horse's rhythm steady beneath her. God help me, I loved him too. That's why I had to do this. If I could give him the S.O.P., maybe he'd forgive me when he learned the truth. If I could destroy my father and save Cody's land, maybe the betrayal wouldn't matter. Maybe he'd understand. Maybe, but probably not. The desert stretched endlessly before her, beautiful and unforgiving under starlight. Somewhere behind her, Cody slept, trusting her. Somewhere ahead, her father waited, expecting her. And caught between them, Larissa Kovalenko rode toward a reckoning that would destroy at least one of the men she'd spent her life trying to survive. The wind carried the scent of creosote and coming violence. She'd learned young that happy endings were for people who didn't know how darkness tasted. But still foolish, desperate, hopeless part of her believed that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough. It wouldn't be. She knew that, had always known that. But for just a few more miles, in the silence before the storm, she let herself pretend. The compound's lights appeared on the horizon like malevolent stars. Larissa squared her shoulders, pushed emotion down deep where it couldn't interfere, and became her father's daughter once more. Cold, calculating, capable of anything. Even breaking the heart of the only man who'd ever made her want to be something different. Cody woke to silence. Wrong silence. The kind that screamed danger in a language his body understood before his mind caught up. His head felt thick, thoughts moving through mud. Drugged. The realization hit like ice water. Jade? His voice echoed in the empty cabin. The note sat on the table beside his Colt, mocking him with its simplicity. Trust me, I'll come back. I promise. Jay. Trust. The word tasted like ashes. He'd trusted her with his body, his home, his goddamn heart, and she'd drugged him like an enemy combatant. Panic and rage warred in his chest as he grabbed weapons with shaking hands. She'd gone to Diamondback Ranch alone, into the Viper's Nest, into the place where men like him disappeared and were never found. I'll drag her out of there, he thought, saddling Ghost with violent efficiency. And then I'll kill her for scaring me like this. After I make sure she's safe. After I hold her and make absolutely certain she's alive. The ride to the compound blurred into desperate speed. Dawn broke blood red across the horizon as Diamondback Ranch materialized from the desert like a wound in the earth. High fences, guard towers, the S.O.P. insignia, a coiled rattlesnake illuminated in neon above the main gate. Everything about it screamed organized crime trying to look legitimate. Cody ditched Ghost a mile out and moved on foot. 5 years of isolation hadn't dulled his training, if anything. The desert had sharpened it. He became a ghost again, the way his instructors had taught him in another lifetime. Over the fence, past the guards, into the belly of the beast. He was looking for Jade, looking for evidence, looking for anything that would help him burn this place to the ground. The main office was locked, alarmed, protected by men with dead eyes and loaded weapons. Cody killed the guard silently, efficiently, without hesitation or remorse. Some part of him recognized that he'd crossed a line, but that part was very far away, buried under desperate love and protective fury. The safe was military grade, but Cody had cracked better in Kandahar. His hands worked automatically, muscle memory older than his isolation, deeper than his fear. The lock clicked. The door swung open. He expected evidence of trafficking, money laundering. the usual sins of men like Billy Kovalenko. What he found was worse. Photographs spilled out like accusations. A young woman, dark hair, fierce eyes, unmistakably Jade, standing beside a man who could only be the rattlesnake himself, Billy Kovalenko. Both armed, both deadly, both smiling like family. Because they were family. The ID confirmed it. Larisa Kovalenko. Not Jade Martinez. Larisa, daughter of Billy, the rattlesnake Kovalenko. Asset, SOP. The land deal paperwork bore her signature. Plans to acquire the Hank Ranch, timelines, strategies. Everything laid out in cold, bureaucratic detail. She'd come for his land. Everything else, the bullet, the recovery, the love, had been theater. Strategy. A long con executed by his enemy's daughter. Physical pain bloomed in Cody's chest. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world tilted and he braced himself against the desk. Photographs clutched in trembling hands. Every moment they'd shared replayed in his mind like torture. Her taking the bullet, him digging it out, her laughter in the desert, her body beneath his, the way she'd whispered his name like a prayer. All lies, every single moment, calculated manipulation by a woman trained since birth to be her father's weapon. She saved my life so she could take everything, he whispered to the empty room. The words tasted like poison, like truth. He gathered evidence with mechanical precision, photographing everything, his hands steady despite the devastation eating him from the inside. Then he rode back to the cabin through the rising sun, red and mocking and cruel. The desert had never looked more like hell. Larisa returned just after dawn, Ghost stumbling with exhaustion. She was bruised, bleeding from a split lip, moving like someone who'd been in a fight. Her clothes were torn, dust-covered, and she carried a bag full of stolen documents. Evidence against her father. Proof of her betrayal of the S.O.P. She'd done it. Planted the bugs, stolen the ledgers, set the trap that would bring down Billy Kovalenko's empire. And now she'd come back to confess everything, to throw herself on Cody's mercy and pray that love was stronger than lies. She pushed open the cabin door. "Cody, I can explain." Then she saw his face. Expressionless, dead-eyed. The same face he'd worn when killing the guard, empty of everything except cold. Absolute fury. The photographs lay scattered across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Her photographs, her real ID, her real name. He knew. "Explain this." His voice was flat, emotionless. He threw a photograph at her feet, her and Billy, armed and smiling. "Explain why Billy Kovalenko's daughter is in my home." Larisa's blood turned to ice. "How did you—" Then understanding crashed over her. The compound. He'd gone to the compound. Found her truth before she could confess it. "Cody, please." Was it part of the plan? He stood slowly, a predator's movement. "Saving my life. Was that how you'd gain my trust? Get me to drop my guard so Daddy could take my land without a fight?" "No." Desperation clawed at her throat. "I saved you because I couldn't let you die. Everything after Cody, I fell in love with you." His laugh was bitter, broken. "Love? You expect me to believe that? You're your father's weapon. This whole thing, the shooting, the recovery, the sex, all strategy. All manipulation. How long did you practice looking vulnerable? How many men have you played this way?" The shooting was real. Tears streamed down her face. "My feelings are real. I came here to destroy him, not to fall for you, but I did. That's why I went last night to plant evidence, to give you everything you need to bring him down." "Destroy him?" Cody's voice rose, control cracking. "You're signing the deal that gives him my land. You're the architect of my destruction. Don't insult me by pretending to be a hero now that you're caught. I was supposed to close the deal." She took a step toward him, stopped when he tensed. "But I couldn't. I planted evidence instead. Called the FBI. Set up a sting for when he comes to finalize everything. I was going to sabotage it all and then tell you the truth." "Convenient." He picked up another document, the land deal with her signature. "Your signature. Your handwriting. Your work. I know how it looks. It looks like betrayal. It looks like you're no better than the snakes you serve. Tell me something, Larisa." He spat her real name like a curse. "Did you laugh about it with Daddy? The dumb cowboy who fell for the pretty girl? The ghost who let someone in just long enough to destroy him?" The accusation hit harder than any bullet. "I hate my father," she whispered. I've been trying to escape him my whole life. Everything I've done. Then why are you still doing his work? Cody's control shattered. He was shouting now, pain bleeding through rage. Why are you still his weapon? Why did you let me? His voice broke. He couldn't finish. Because I thought I could save us both. Larissa was crying openly now, past pride, past strategy. I thought if I destroyed him from the inside, you'd forgive me. I thought love could be enough. Love. He shook his head, something dying in his eyes. You don't know what that word means. Get out. Cody, please. Get out of my home, off my land. His hand drifted to his weapon, not pointing it, but the threat was clear. You have 10 seconds. Then I stop being grateful you saved my life and start remembering you're Billy Kovalenko's daughter. I love you. The words were desperate, true, useless. Whatever you believe about everything else, that's true. I don't believe anything that comes out of your mouth. His face was stone, but his voice trembled. 9 seconds. She grabbed her bag with shaking hands, stumbled toward the door, turned back one last time to see him standing in the ruins of what they'd built together. I love you, she said again, and I'm sorry. For all of it. 8 seconds. She ran. Cody stood in the empty cabin, listening to her vehicle disappear into the desert. Then, slowly, methodically, he began destroying everything that reminded him of her. The maps they'd studied together, the blankets that still smelled like her, the coffee mug she'd used every morning. He hurled them all outside, poured whiskey on them, set them ablaze. He sat on his porch and watched it burn, bottle in hand, as the sun climbed higher. Watched their brief, bright happiness turn to ash and smoke. I'd survived bullets, bombs, and betrayals, he thought, taking a long drink. Survived hell overseas and isolation at home. But this losing her, loving her, hating her all at once, this might actually kill me. The desert wind scattered the ashes across the land his family had bled for. The land Larissa Kovalenko had come to steal. The land he'd died defending. Alone again, the way he was always meant to be. Ghost wandered back hours later, saddlebags empty, bearing no trace of the woman who'd ridden him into the compound. Even the horse looked betrayed. Cody loaded his weapons in silence and waited for war. 3 days without sleep changed a man, turned him into something sharp and hollow, all edges and empty spaces. Cody hadn't eaten either, just whiskey and black coffee and the bitter taste of betrayal that wouldn't wash away no matter how much he drank. He moved through his ranch like a wraith, setting traps, establishing kill zones, preparing for the war he knew was coming. Tripwires along the fence line. Claymores buried at strategic choke points. Sniper positions with clear sight lines and covered retreat routes. He was weaponizing his home, turning his family's legacy into a death trap. If the SOP wanted this land, they'd have to pry it from his cold, dead hands, and he'd take as many of those bastards with him as possible. If she taught me anything, he thought, checking the sight on his rifle for the 3rd time, it's that you can't trust anyone. Fine, I'll do this alone, like I should have from the start. The news came via the sheriff's scanner he kept for emergencies. Final land deal scheduled for 2 days from now at Diamondback Ranch. Billy Kovalenko himself was coming to close it, to personally end the last holdout in Dust Devil County. The rattlesnake wanted to watch Cody's resistance die. Perfect. Cody checked his ammunition, counted magazines, sharpened his kabar until it could split hairs. He was going to kill Billy Kovalenko. Didn't matter if it cost him his life, his freedom, his soul. The man who'd sent his daughter to destroy him would bleed out on desert soil, and maybe that would be enough. Maybe that would fill the hollow space where his heart used to be. If I'm going to die, he muttered, loading his saddlebags, at least I'll die pissing off a Ukrainian mobster. Grandpa would have approved. The dark humor felt thin, brittle, but it was all he had left. 50 miles away, Larissa Kovalenko sat in a motel room that smelled like cigarettes and desperation, surrounded by evidence that could topple an empire. She hadn't slept either, hadn't eaten, just cried until she had no tears left, then stared at the water-stained ceiling and tried to figure out how to breathe around the knife in her chest. Cody hated her, would always hate her, and she deserved it. But on the 3rd day, something shifted. The grief hardened into resolve, cold and sharp as the blade her father had taught her to use. She sat up, wiped her face, and reached for her encrypted phone. He'll never forgive me, she thought, dialing the first number. Fine. I'll give him justice anyway. She called the FBI field office in El Paso, then ATF, then every federal agency that had been trying to build a case against her father for the past decade. She gave them everything: dates, locations, shipments, names, the evidence she'd stolen from Diamondback Ranch, the recordings she'd made, the paper trail that led straight to Billy Kovalenko's empire. I'll testify, she told the FBI agent, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. I'll give you everything. But I need you at Diamondback Ranch in 2 days. He'll be there for the final land deal. If you want him, that's your chance. The agent was skeptical. Who could blame him? But the evidence was solid, irrefutable. He agreed. Larissa ended the call and stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. She looked like hell, eyes hollow, skin pale, the face of a woman who'd lost everything that mattered. If I can't have love, she thought, pulling on her tactical gear, I'll settle for vengeance, for both of us. She knew her father would kill her when he found out. Knew she was riding toward her own execution. But better to die for something real for Cody, for justice, for the slim chance at redemption than to live as Billy Kovalenko's daughter for one more day. In his office at Diamondback Ranch, Billy Kovalenko studied maps of Dust Devil County with the satisfaction of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. Every piece of land marked with the S.O.P. insignia except one, the Hank Ranch. That stubborn stain would be erased in 2 days, then the territory would be complete. His lieutenant entered without knocking. We have a situation. Billy didn't look up. Define situation. The daughter. She's in the area. Been active. Now Billy looked up, dark eyes sharp. Active how? Meeting with federal agents. Multiple agencies. Seems she's decided to be disloyal. The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably. Should we eliminate her? Billy leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. My daughter died the moment she chose betrayal, he said, voice cold as winter steel. The woman wearing her face is merely a problem to be solved. But even as he spoke, a plan formed, beautiful in its simplicity, brutal in its efficiency. Bring her to Diamondback Ranch for the signing, he ordered. Let her watch her failure. Let her see everything she tried to destroy flourish anyway. Then we end her, publicly. A message to anyone else who thinks blood makes them immune to consequences. The lieutenant nodded and left. Billy returned to his maps, a smile playing at his lips. His daughter had always been weak, too much of her American mother in her, not enough Ukrainian steel. He'd tried to forge her into a weapon, but some metals refused to be shaped. No matter, he had other weapons. And in 2 days, both his rebellious daughter and that stubborn cowboy would be dealt with. The land would be his, the empire would be complete. And anyone foolish enough to resist would see what happened to those who defied the rattlesnake. The sun set over Dust Devil County, painting the desert in shades of blood and fire. In 3 separate locations, 3 people prepared for war. Cody loaded his final magazine, checked his rifle one last time, and mentally said goodbye to the land his family had bled for. If this was his last stand, at least it would be memorable. Larissa holstered her weapon, gathered her evidence, and drove toward Diamondback Ranch. She'd once asked Cody if he ever let anyone in. Now she understood why he hadn't, because trust was a blade that always cut both ways. Billy Kovalenko sent his orders and waited. In his world, problems were solved with bullets and fear. His daughter was just another problem. The cowboy was another. Soon, neither would exist. 3 people. 3 plans. 2 days until they collided in blood and fire. One would walk away. Maybe. Or maybe the desert would claim them all, the way it claimed everything that stayed too long in hell. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming violence. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote howled a lonely, desperate sound. Or maybe that was just Cody, Ghost, or Larissa, each preparing to face their ending alone. The storm was coming. 2 days until the deal. 2 days until Diamondback Ranch became a graveyard or a salvation. 2 days until love, hate, and vengeance met in the place where the desert kept its secrets, and the desert never gave them back. Diamondback Ranch looked like money laundered through legitimacy, all Spanish tile and stucco walls, carefully manicured lawns in the middle of the desert wasteland. But the guards told the real story. 24 armed men positioned at strategic intervals, dead eyes scanning for threats. This wasn't a business meeting. It was a fortress, hosting an execution disguised as paperwork. Billy Kovalenko held court in the main hall like a king surveying his kingdom. Lawyers in expensive suits, local officials who'd been bought and paid for, business associates whose hands were red with other people's blood. They mingled over champagne while the rattlesnake watched, satisfied. Today, Dust Devil County would finally be his. Today, the last holdout would fall. The doors opened. Guards dragged Larissa in hands bound behind her back, face bruised, lips split and still bleeding. They'd found her at the motel that morning. She hadn't run, hadn't fought, just gathered her evidence and waited for the inevitable. "My dear daughter," Billy said, voice carrying across the hall. Public smile, private malice. "So good of you to join us." Larissa met his eyes, defiant despite the restraints. "Enjoying your last day of freedom, Dad?" He laughed, genuine amusement that made everyone else nervous. "Still so spirited. That's the Ukrainian in you. Pity you wasted it on betrayal. You could have been magnificent. I learned from the best. You taught me how to destroy empires." She smiled through bloody teeth. "I just chose to destroy yours." On the ridge overlooking the compound, Cody Hank lay prone behind his rifle, watching through the scope. He'd infiltrated before dawn, using every skill his instructors had beaten into him a lifetime ago. The plan was simple: wait for Billy Kovalenko to arrive, put a bullet through his skull, consequences be damned. But then he'd seen Larissa. Bound, beaten, defiant in the face of death. His heart clenched despite the rage still burning in his chest. She'd betrayed him, lied to him, used him, and he was still willing to die for her. The realization was bitter as desert dust. "She's about to die," he thought, finger on the trigger. "Do I care? Damn it, yes." Inside, the signing ceremony began. Documents spread across a massive table, pens ready, Billy's triumph imminent. Lawyers started reading terms and conditions while Larissa stood bound between guards, watching her father claim everything she'd tried to protect. "Before we sign," Larissa called out, voice clear and strong. "Everyone should see what they're buying into." She nodded to a man in the corner, ostensibly a lawyer, actually FBI Special Agent Marcus Chen. He produced a ledger from his briefcase. Not just any ledger, the ledger. Every crime Billy Kovalenko had committed in 20 years, meticulously documented. "This is what you're signing with," Larissa shouted to the assembled guests. "A man who traffics weapons and humans, who murders witnesses, who's corrupted every official in this room." Billy's face went dark. Kill her now. He's the rattlesnake." Larissa kept shouting even as guards reached for weapons. "He's poisoned this entire county, and I have proof." FBI agents dropped their covers. Chaos erupted. Billy pulled his own weapon, aiming directly at his daughter's head. Larissa met his eyes, unafraid. "You always were weak," Billy said. The shot came from the ridge. The guard to Billy's left dropped, hole in his forehead. Then another shot, another guard down. Cody Hank had entered the game. All hell broke loose. Guards returned fire at the ridge. FBI agents revealed themselves, shouting orders. Civilians scattered, screaming. Billy roared orders, trying to regain control of his unraveling empire. And Larissa, hands still bound, dropped and rolled, using the chaos to reach the knife one of the dead guards had dropped. Cody fought his way down from the ridge and into the compound, rifle barking precision shots. He kicked open the main door, sweeping for targets. "Get down!" Larissa hit the ground as he provided cover fire. Their eyes met across the room, recognition, relief, fury, love, all colliding in a single glance. "I told you to get off my land," Cody shouted, dropping another enforcer. "You're off yours, Cowboy." She freed her hands, grabbed a fallen weapon, and suddenly they were back to back, fighting like they'd trained together their entire lives. Still annoying even during shootouts, Cody fired twice. 2 guards fell. "It's part of my charm." Larissa took out a man flanking left. "Behind you." They moved like water, like muscle memory from a shared past they'd never had, his sharpshooting covering her advances, her tactical awareness protecting his blind spots. Despite everything, the lies, the betrayal, the shattered trust, they fit together like matched blades. Billy Kovalenko watched his empire crumble, rage consuming reason. He zeroed in on Larissa with single-minded hatred. "You ungrateful." He fired. The bullet was meant for her heart. But Cody moved, threw himself in front of her the way she'd once thrown herself in front of him. The bullet grazed his ribs, tearing flesh, drawing blood. "We're even now," he grunted, returning fire. The battle was chaos and precision, violence and beauty. Cody's rifle found targets with cold efficiency. Larissa moved through the carnage like her father had trained her, lethal, graceful, unstoppable. The FBI closed in, picking off guards, shouting for surrender. Billy's men fell. His empire crumbled. His kingdom turned to ash. Finally, silence, smoke clearing, bodies on the ground. And in the center of the devastation, Billy Kovalenko and his daughter faced each other one last time. "I made you," Billy said, gun aimed at her heart. "Everything you are, you owe to me." "You're right." Larissa's voice was steady, her weapon trained on him. "You made me, but I chose to unmake you." Her finger tightened on the trigger, but Cody's hand stopped her, gentle, firm. "Don't," he said quietly. "You're not your father. Don't become him now." For a moment, she hesitated. That moment was all Billy needed. He swung his weapon toward Cody, murder in his eyes, no hesitation, no mercy. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Billy Kovalenko dropped, blood blooming across his chest. His eyes, so like his daughter's, stared at nothing. The rattlesnake was dead. Silence fell like snow. FBI agents moved in, securing the scene, calling for medical. S.O.P. enforcers surrendered or fell. The empire that had strangled Dust Devil County for a generation collapsed in blood and gun smoke. Cody and Larissa stood in the ruins, both bleeding, both breathing hard. They stared at each other across the carnage, everything said and unsaid hanging between them like ghosts. "I know you can't forgive me," Larissa said quietly. "But I meant what I said. All of it." Cody was silent for a long moment. Then, "I know. I was just too angry to hear it." He turned and walked toward the door. Each step away from her felt like dying, but he took them anyway. Some wounds were too deep. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, even when love demanded it. "Cody," her voice broke. He stopped but didn't turn around. "You saved my land, destroyed your father's empire. That's enough. It has to be enough." Then he was gone, disappearing into the desert sunrise while FBI agents swarmed around her, asking questions, taking statements, processing the daughter of Billy Kovalenko, who'd brought down his kingdom. Larissa watched him go, tears streaming down her face. They'd won. The S.O.P. was finished. The land was safe. Justice had been served. But victory tasted like ashes, and she'd never felt more alone. 6 months later, Cody Hank stood on his porch watching the sun bleed across the horizon, and the victory felt hollow as desert wind. The S.O.P. was finished, assets seized, territory freed, Dust Devil County finally breathing without the rattlesnake's grip around its throat. His ranch was secure, his family's legacy protected. He'd won. So why did it feel like he'd lost everything that mattered? He worked the land alone again, falling back into the rhythms of isolation like putting on old clothes. But they didn't fit anymore. The cabin felt too empty, the silence too loud. Everywhere he looked, he saw her teaching her to ride, laughing at his dark humor, lying tangled in his sheets with sunlight painting her skin gold. He'd kept one thing, her real ID photo, the one he'd stolen from the compound. Larissa Kovalenko stared back at him from the cracked photograph, fierce and beautiful and complicated. He looked at it every night before sleep refused to come. "I should hate you," he whispered to the image. "Some days I do. Most days I just miss you." The radio crackled with evening news while he made dinner for one. Larissa Kovalenko had cooperated fully with federal authorities. Her testimony had dismantled what remained of the S.O.P. network across 3 states. In exchange for her cooperation and evidence, she'd been granted immunity and placed in witness protection. New identity, new life, somewhere far from the desert that had nearly killed them both. Cody's hands shook as he stirred beans on the stove. He told himself it was fatigue. He was lying, same as she'd lied, and the irony wasn't lost on him. Evening found him back on the porch with whiskey and sunset, same ritual that had sustained him through 5 years of isolation. Except now it felt like penance, like waiting for something that would never come. The sound of an engine broke the desert silence. Cody's hand found his Colt by instinct, old habits dying hard. A vehicle crested the ridge, dust trailing behind it like a ghost's cape. Not S.O.P., They were finished, not law enforcement. They'd stopped checking on him months ago. The car stopped. The door opened. And Larisa Kovalenko stepped out into the dying light. She looked different, simpler. No tactical gear or business casual armor. Just jeans and a white shirt and nervous hands that wouldn't stay still. Her hair was shorter, natural. Her face bare of the careful masks she'd worn. She looked younger, terrified, real. They stared at each other across the distance, 6 months and 6 feet, and a chasm of broken trust between them. "Thought you'd be halfway across the world by now," Cody said, voice rough. "I was." She took 1 step closer, stopped. "Montana. They gave me a house, a job, a whole new history. Turned out everywhere I went, I left my heart in Dust Devil County. That right? I don't expect forgiveness." The words tumbled out fast, desperate. "But I needed you to know everything I said, everything I felt that was real. The only real thing in my entire life." Cody set down his whiskey with deliberate care. "You lied to me, used a fake name, came here to steal my land." "I did." She met his eyes, unflinching. "And I'd do the same thing again if it meant meeting you. The lying, the betrayal. I'd endure all of it again for the chance to love you, even if you hate me." "I don't hate you." The admission tore out of him, raw and bleeding. "I tried. God knows I tried. Spent 6 months trying to convince myself you were just another enemy. But I can't. I can't hate you." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm sorry. For all of it. I'm so sorry." He stepped off the porch, closing the distance between them. "What's your real name? I'm tired of calling you by the wrong one." "Larisa. Larisa Kovalenko." "That's a hell of a name to carry." "I know." She wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "But it's mine. For better or worse, it's who I am. I kept it. Figured I should own where I come from while choosing where I'm going." "And where's that?" "Wherever you are." She looked up at him, vulnerable in a way she'd never been before. "If you'll have me." Cody studied her, really looked. Saw the genuine remorse carved into her features. The courage it took to come back when she could have stayed hidden. The love that had brought her across 3 states to a man who had every right to shoot her on sight. "You saved my life," he said slowly. "You destroyed your father's empire. You came back when you could have run." He paused, let the words settle. "I'd be an idiot to let you walk away twice." "So?" Hope flickered in her eyes, fragile as desert flowers after rain. "Come home, Larisa. Come home." She ran to him. The embrace was desperate, healing. Real 2 broken pieces finally finding their matching edges. He kissed her like drowning, like salvation, like coming back to life after 6 months of merely existing. She kissed him back with everything she had. Every apology and promise and desperate hope poured into the contact. When they pulled back, foreheads touching, both breathing hard, she whispered, "I love you. For real this time. All of it real." "I know." He smiled, genuine, unguarded. "I love you too. Probably loved you when you were still lying to me. Definitely love you now." They laughed through tears, the sound carrying across the desert like a promise, like healing beginning, like 2 people who'd survived hell discovering they could survive peace together. The next morning found them riding horses across his land as the sun painted the desert gold and pink and impossible. Cody was teaching her to rope cattle, patient despite her frustration. "Still terrible at this," he observed, grinning as she missed for the 3rd time. "Give me time. I'm a fast learner." "I know." His voice softened. "You learn to love a ghost. That's no small feat." "You're not a ghost anymore." She caught his hand, laced their fingers together. "Neither am I." They rode toward the sunrise, side by side, partners in every sense. The desert stretched endlessly before them, beautiful, unforgiving, theirs. 2 people who'd begun in violence and betrayal, who'd survived bullets and lies and the death of everything they thought they knew about love. Some love stories begin with a kiss. Theirs began with a bullet. But it ended with something harder won and infinitely more precious. Forgiveness, trust, and the promise that tomorrow they'd face the desert together. Ghost and the mare kept pace with each other, hoofbeats steady as heartbeats, carrying their riders toward a future they'd earned through fire and blood. Behind them, the cabin stood solid against the morning light. Home. Not just for a ghost cowboy anymore, but for the Mafia princess who'd chosen love over legacy. The desert wind carried the scent of creosote and possibility. And for the first time in both their lives, tomorrow didn't taste like survival. It tasted like hope. The end. Or is it? What do you think? Should there be a part 2? Drop yes in the comments if you want to see Cody and Larissa's next adventure. Don't forget to subscribe for more intense romance stories. Hit that like button if and share with someone who loves cowboys, danger, and love that defies the odds. Comment below. What was your favorite moment?